Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to a new week. It is Monday, and I am looking forward to the end of this week when Darktide is supposed to be getting another patch so I can start playing it and recording it. That means I have some lovely new footage to be putting at the back of some of my videos, which will be very, very, very nice. And also, I'll be streaming it, so that'll be fun as well. If you like what I do, the subscribe button's down below, and the real subscribe button in the Patreon is also down below. And click that and have a little go. Buy me a pint if you want to. That is all up to you. And also the Discord is down below if you need any support or any help or anybody to talk to. Just come along there and have a talk to me or someone else. I tend to pop up on the Discord when you least expect it. So whenever my work flow allows, I just jump on and have a little word with you and have a little talk. So today is Games Workshop Stories, and this is something that I have been sent by a gentleman that I've been emailing back and forth with for a couple of months now. Ex-colleague of mine. Very nice bloke. I'm not going to mention his name, obviously, but a very nice bloke. And yeah, I finally got the permission to talk about his story, essentially. So he wrote it out for me, and I will say, this is one of the best written stories I've had in quite a long time. Not just blowing smoke up his backside either. Very, very, very good stuff. So, it's a bit of a good news, bad news situation kind of a story, but I'll get into it right now, so I'm not going to leave you with any further ado. Gregarious Guardsman says, "Hey North, thanks for giving Games Workshop guys a way to find an outlet. I've made a new Discord account just to send this to you, as it's a bit of a harrowing tale. It is really a tale of two different stories that interlock together, so I hope you will forgive me. On with the tale anyway. I run a store in the UK. The two stories I'm about to share take place in 2008, during my first stint with the company. I left and returned a few years later, when I took over my first store. Now, my store was a bit of a quiet one. In fact, a lot of the time, it felt like I was part of some kind of graveyard shift. The store hardly made any money before I got there. It was in a very bad position in the local town, and was a little bit away from everything in terms of distance. As such, most parents stopped by the cheaper, friendly local game store in the centre. Go figure. The stress did not really start for about 6 months. I think headquarters were letting me bed in to see if the fortunes of the store would change. And they kind of did. We had a steady 3% growth month on month on average. Whilst this may seem minuscule, this store was almost always in the red month by month. I was so proud of turning things around and hitting my KPIs. For those of you who don't know, KPIs is Key Performance Indicator. So essentially, a lot of you will know because you've listened to my stories before, that I've had to read out. So KPIs, Key Performance Indicators. So Games Workshop want you to sell certain things in the store more than others. So if you sell like a Necron Warriors box, they're not going to be very impressed by that. But if you sold them a Dark Imperium or a Indomitus Crusade box, things like that, they will be very impressed by that, because that is a starter box set, getting somebody into the hobby sort of a thing. It's kind of a really silly system, because what they fail to see is that they think everybody's hitting their KPIs out of the park when a new version of Warhammer 40,000 drops, which isn't the case. A lot of regulars are coming back and buying the new edition because it has some nice models in it. That doesn't mean we're getting new people into the hobby. There are a lot of false positives and false negatives with KPIs. They sort of went some way to fixing this when they changed their tune and said, look, now all of the start collecting boxes are KPIs, which is great. I like that. That's a really good change. That didn't come in for years, though. For years, in 7th edition was the bad old days, where literally, if you weren't selling Dark Vengeance, Games Workshop were not interested in your progress at all. If you needed to sell Dark Vengeance, if you weren't selling Dark Vengeance, they were annoyed at you. Even though, if little Timmy comes in and really likes Gundams and says, oh, I really like that Tau, those Tau guys, I'm like, well, can you buy the Dark Vengeance? No, I want to buy the Tau, but I really want to buy Dark Vengeance because of my KPIs, right? Well, Timmy doesn't want Dark Vengeance, he wants Tau. And so you sell him the Start Collecting Tau box set, and he's getting into the hobby with a brand new starter paint set. But of course, you don't get any credit for that because it's not Dark Vengeance. This is how silly they are at times. Moving on. Guardsman says, I was asking decent questions of customers, whilst not allowing the store to be used as a daycare for local kids. The job was stressful enough without being a babysitter. Instead, I pointed parents to a parent-child 40k tournament that I held every Sunday, with points awarded for wins in 500-point games. I only ever revealed the winners, never the placing, to keep morale up. Very, very, very clever. I like that. Okay. The first thing that came into my head there when you said that was, oh my god, there can be a lot of disappointed kids there, but if only one parent and child grouping is winning one week, and everybody else is losing together, that's fine. And this generally solved the daycare problem and helped me sell a lot more starter sets. Just a bit of advice for other managers listening to this who are sick of being used as a child-minding service. Another big reason for the store's turnaround was that I cultivated the good folks in the hobby in the local area. I had an amazing group of regulars, a dirty word at Games Workshop, that I managed to get to come into the store by basically saying I needed their help to build something there, to build a new store. And if they were willing to give me their time, I'd be able to work with them to make sure they had access to the latest releases by keeping some for them, running events, things like that. You scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of thing. Yeah, that's something that a lot more managers should do. If you see regular customers who are a bit older, who are trustworthy and are really cool dudes, the best thing to do to keep them around, because Games Workshop wants to do FOMO so much, they want to do a fear of missing out, so they will only make a certain amount of different sets. Well, you can kind of soft lock bribe people into coming to your store by saying, hey, if you like me, and you like the store, you like that box set, if you ever need a box set, I'll keep one for you. All you need to do is tell me, and I'll keep one for you, and then you can come in and buy it. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. That's fine. I wish FOMO wasn't there, but you may as well use it to grow your store and to make sure that you got the right people in your store who are going to help you run it, which is amazing. One thing I really loved about my own Games Workshop was that it was kind of self-running. I had one guy there called Jeff, who was like in his 50s, and he ran a retail business, and he was just such a cool guy. If I ever had to dash out to like pick something up, or dash out to like, you know, literally solve a problem, like I had one guy was walking past trying to smash my window, which was nice, so I had to run out and sort that situation out. I could always leave Jeff to just not do anything with the till, but to run the store, and you know, nothing was ever going missing while he was there. He was a good guy, kept everything going, and it was just great, and unpaid, you know. But I think what people like, if they come into a Games Workshop, adults like to be treated as adults. So if you like to say to somebody, listen mate, that guy's trying to break my window, can I just go out and stop that, and yeah, I'll be back in a second, you hold the store down for me. No one's going to say no to that. Right? They're going to be like, wow, he trusts me. Wow, how cool is that? And you develop that closer bond. It's all about being able to read people and read what their intentions are, really. But yeah, it looks like you got a good one here. The chief amongst these legends, leather-jacketed legends, was Steve. An older gentleman of about 40-odd years. I know that's not old, but in the store, he was older than most. Who had a decent job in the city as an architect, but loved his Iron Warriors. Oh, a man of culture. Gotta love a man of culture. He'd come in all the time with a larger-than-life love for the hobby that he seemed to spread to everybody else. He was an amazing bloke. He'd regularly throw games by accident, simply because he was having a good time and wanted the other person to have a decent time too. He almost always charged his Warpsmith straight into an enemy battle line, just to see the look on his opponent's face as they gunned down his best model. Good lad. I mean, I'm not saying throw your games all the time, but like there is something to be said of knowing that, you know, maybe it's time for you to give back a little bit if somebody hasn't won for a little while. He'd always listen to whoever was speaking to him as if they were the only people in the room. He had that gift of being completely engrossed in what you're saying, so that you felt heard. In short, the ideal customer and hobbyist. Okay, cool. Good on Steve. There was one occasion where I'm reminded of an old story of yours about a legend. Steve was very similar to this. We had a lad called Jamie who would come in and get a White Dwarf magazine once a month. It's all he could afford with his pocket money. He'd sit there and read constantly, cover to cover, and would then just reread the thing over again and again. It was something I picked up on, and finally, I started giving my free White Dwarf to him to read so he could save up for a model for once. Good lad. Yeah, I mean, you get a free White Dwarf, so who cares? You can give it away. In the end, I also ended up picking out black library books for him to read whilst in the store. His mum was really happy that his literacy skills were picking up, and that black library brought all of that out in him. Although, a lot of the stories he wrote in English class were apparently rather violent and filled with bolter fire. You know where to hit me in the feels where you're like nurturing young writers. That's good. Good shit. Jamie was really into Blood Angels, and so when it came time for Christmas, his mum came in with about £100 to get him his presents. It was literally all she had to give him, and she was grateful for even that. Yeah, I mean, £100 may sound like a lot, but in this day and age, 2008 as well, like £100 and for a kid at Christmas. I know a few people there be like, well, I didn't get that when I was... Oh, shut up. Like, you know, £100 over Christmas these days with the price of things is not a lot of money. Let's be honest, if your kid is really into Warhammer, what does £100 get you? Let's be honest. You know, a combat patrol is 70 quid. So he's going to get one box and maybe some paints. You know, again, it's better than nothing. I'm fully behind that. But when you have to realise as well, when kids are going into school and they're getting hundreds and hundreds of pounds spent on them over Christmas, and this guy's wandering in with his... yeah, it will teach him some sort of the value of money and things like that, but it will also kind of damage him when he's around his friends and he's seeing what they're getting and what they've got. So yeah, I can understand why this isn't an ideal situation. And also, as a Games Workshop manager, this does happen. You don't half feel terrible because the prices of your models, right? When parents like this come in and all they want is the best for their kids, all they want is for their kids to love Warhammer and to be into it, because they can see how much of a positive influence it is on their lives. And they come in and they're like, I don't have the money for this. Like, I either go without rent or mortgage payments, or I get in this model, you know? And those are the people that, when I knew their situation was real, I have no problem admitting, towards the end of my time at Games Workshop, when I knew I was leaving in that last month, this happened once or twice, where it was coming up to my last Christmas. I left in the February, so I was coming up to my last Christmas, and I knew I was going at this point. When I had one or two situations where a parent would come in, and I knew they were hard up, and I knew they were hard working, and I just knew that they just needed a break. There were one or two box sets, shall we say, that were known lost because they were damaged, quote unquote, that found their way into the arms of these parents. I'm not ashamed to admit that at all. You know, because a lot of them were damaged because Games Workshop weren't very good at sending me stuff and I couldn't sell them. But, you know, there was at least one box set, one Battle Force of Space Marines that I was just like, oh no, it's got a rip in it. Here you are. Like, sort of a thing. I don't care, right? You know, and the looks on their faces were just like, oh my god, I am never letting him leave this hobby. You guys are amazing. And I'm like, yeah, just keep it between me and you. But yes, this is from me and from Games Workshop. Just say, you know, Merry Christmas. You know, that's that kind of a thing. Only did it 2 or 3 times. You know, didn't make a habit of it, and it was only with the people who were in true need. And it was only because I was leaving. If I wasn't leaving, there's no way I would have done it. I would have found some other way to help them out by giving them some free paints or something. But yeah, as a Games Workshop manager, I honestly think you have a duty of care to your customers, especially the ones who are actually really, really, really fighting against the tide financially. If their kids are really, really finding the hobby a help to them, then you have a duty of care to make sure that they stay in the hobby, and that financial burdens isn't the reason that they leave the hobby. Am I saying steal shit? No, of course not. But what I'm saying is, if you get a free White Dwarf a month, just give it to the kid. You know, if you need to known loss some paints for a store project, and you have those paints left over, give them to the kid. If you need to known loss some models that you need to lose for a store project, and you only needed 2 models out of the set, give the rest to the kid if they're doing the army. Little things like that will go a long, 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 long way to making sure that we don't lose any of these fantastic people from the hobby moving forwards. Anyway, I'll stop rambling. So, she was grateful for even that. As she is walking around the store, so Jamie's mum has come in to get some stuff for Christmas, and she's only got £100 to spend. As she is walking around the store, Steve approaches her and myself and asks if he can have a word. He has a rather serious look on his face, and I'm a bit worried. He offers to double anything that Jamie's mum buys, as Jamie, in his words, was an extremely polite, hard-working and intelligent young man who was a credit to her and her skills as a mother. Wow. Either this dude's angling for a date, or, like, that's cool. He also noted that if he ever wanted to work in architecture, Jamie he means, then they should give him a call, and gave his card to her. So Steve gives his card to Jamie's mum. Cool. Initially, Jamie's mum refused this, but Steve laid it out and told her that he had more money than he knew what to do with, and practically begged them to let him help. And she relented, finally. This was the kind of store we had. It's one of my all-time favourite memories, and I have more like this. I genuinely believe the hobby brings the best out of people. James' mum was beside herself with joy when she walked out with several big bags full of stuff, blood angels for his army. Fantastic, man. That's awesome. That is awesome. And they do exist. I've had at least a few stories. I've had one of my own that I put on there this time last year. And yeah, they do exist. These people are absolute diamonds of the hobby, man. They really are. And so one day, on a Friday gaming night that I like to host on days that I had the weekend off, in brackets, I finally had staff to cover me, which was once a month. Steve never showed. He had made every single event prior to this, and I was not sure what was going on, but put it down to him being a busy guy as an architect. Later on that day, one of his friends headed to the store and pulled me aside to tell me Steve was in hospital after a suspected suicide attempt. Oh no. This rocked me to the core. This was not a guy who you would think was struggling with any demons or with dark moods. He was always out to help those around him and had a smile on his face most of the time. Yeah, I'll say this. A lot of the guys I know who are... I don't do this, by the way. Whenever I have a depressive episode, I generally don't want to help people. I just stay away from them. But I do know people that when they're feeling like this all the time, they go out of their way to make sure that others are okay. Not because it gives them a sense of feeling of nice inside. They're not doing it out of a selfish need for look what I just did. Because they're never going to feel that, because they have they have depression, right? So whatever they do is going to backfire on them emotionally. They do it because they don't want you to feel the way that they do, and it's one of the most beautifully selfless things that I've ever seen people do, is when people have severe depression and they go out of their way to make sure that other people are okay. That to me is just an amazing advocate for the human spirit. It really is, because when you don't have depression and you go out of your way to help people, that's great, but you could also frame that as it's kind of selfish because you feel good when you help people, right? Well, somebody with depression is not going to feel good either way, but they do it anyway because they don't want you to feel how they're feeling. Those are the heroes, man. Those are the Chads. Those are the warriors out there. Those are the good soldiers. And it seems like this guy was one of those. I'm really sorry that he felt that he had no other choice than to try and do that. I can only hope that things are getting better and I can have a little read more of this. I haven't read the second part of this, so I got to that bit and it was a bit hard for me last night because, I'm sitting in bed and I'm reading this and I'm thinking, oh dear. So I put it down and watched some happy videos before I went to sleep. So, Guardsman carries on. Now, I know these days, a lot of folks say that anyone can fall victim to depression and things, but even in 2008, it was not that explored, and you were not that exposed to such ideas. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's a very new phenomenon to be opening up about mental health. So I was floored, to say the least. I let Steve's friend know that if he needed anything, that I would be there for him, and gave him my home and mobile phone number to pass to Steve. I went home to my flatmate that night and brainstormed just what the hell to do, and ended up deciding to take this to my next training day in Nottingham to run past the brain trust of colleagues. The training day in question was the following weekend, and I headed down there and bided my time before we had a group training session where, as always, we were encouraged to talk about factors of the job that we found difficult in a separate boardroom whilst we all sat around a table. There were 8 managers in the room, of which I was one, and the head of retail at the time. Or a head of retail, somebody high up as a rep in retail anyway, from what I remember. Okay. I chimed in and told the room about how much Steve's situation had rocked me to the core, how I wanted to figure out a way to help even if it's just a token thing. How I'd give him a means to contact me, and perhaps an event where he played me would be a good idea. Yeah, those are good ideas. I was out of ideas though, and to be honest, was running out of steam. I was stopped in my tracks by another manager, who scolded me that giving my personal information to a customer was a very bad idea and grounds for disciplinary action. Is he fucking high? Is this guy is he serious? It was a total breach of professional distance, so he said. Do you know what really irks me? Right? Technically, that other manager's right. Technically. But that is a statement made from corporate, almost sociopathic, cold logic, Vulcan logic. There is no emotion or empathy behind that suggestion at all. And I'm willing to bet that as we go on in this, the rest of the managers here are all in favour of this. I can, because the head honcho at the table is going to be very, very against you being personally involved with a customer on any level. Which is ironic, because a lot of the managers that I know ended up shagging a load of mums. So, what's good for the goose and all that. And they all tended to be old-timers, all the people who were probably sitting at this table right here, whinging about you trying to help somebody who actually has depression. But anyway, moving on. Again, I was staggered, only to look around the room and see a lot of nodding heads in agreement. I was then told by the chair of the meeting that events such as tournaments and campaigns were a bad idea, as they tend to lead to the wrong kind of people, quote-unquote, coming into our stores. He said that regular customers were not really what we needed in stores, but a constant in and out of foot traffic, folks being recruited into the hobby and retained through the product rather than the space. Regulars, so he said, would strangle the store without actually spending any money, and before long I'd be running some sort of gaming youth club. Again, I know you're all expecting me to jump down this guy's throat here in the story and be tearing him apart, and as much as I do want to, I also have to say, he's technically right. As somebody who's ran a Games Workshop store, ask any Games Workshop manager who's now on YouTube. There are now a few of us. I don't know whether I started a trend or something, but here we are. This is something that does happen in stores. You will have a store, and you will have regulars, and you will have certain regulars who bring nothing to the store, who never buy anything at the store. They will come in and use your hobby space. They will use your better terrain and tables to play games on, and they will never, ever do anything positive in your store. In fact, they will spend their money at the friendly local game store down the road, whilst they badmouth your Games Workshop store before coming back and playing all of their games at your store. It just happens, because they're nerds and they don't like corporations. Don't get me wrong, what this guy says is kind of true. There are certain regulars, but as with everything in life, there is a balancing act to perform here. Yes, there are certain regulars who are bad for your store, but there are also regulars who are the glue of your store. It's about being a human being and knowing how to gauge and judge people in a good way. Steve, in this situation, is a regular that I would want to build my store around. It's kind of like having a football team and having a really good player there that you then build the entire squad around. It's exactly the same with this. You need your team. You need your guys there at the store. You need your phalanx of chads at the store to help you out. And this Steve is the kind of guy that I would be building the store around. I'm saying, right, okay, he is one of the central pillars of the community. In he comes, and I'm going to build some guys around him. These are the kind of guys I want at my Games Workshop store. I do not like the fact that all the regulars are thrown into the same jar. I don't. But I do see his point. I see his point, but what I don't agree with, number one, is that it's a blanket statement. That means he's a moron, because only morons make these blanket statements without actually looking at who these people are. And number two, he's making it in completely the wrong context. We have a manager here who's asking for advice on how to have empathy with one of his customers who has tried to commit suicide, and all this douche nozzle can think of is how it affects the store, how it affects the money coming into the store, and how regulars are a bad thing. He's actually going against the guy who's tried to commit... I hate this. I hate everything about this guy and what he's saying. Fuck him and the horse he rode in on. Get him in the sea. Guardsman says, my mouth was slightly ajar, and I said I'd like to reiterate my need for advice about what to do with Steve. I was told that, to be honest, it was not my problem, and that running a store is hard enough without adding everybody's burdens to it. Which, let's be honest, is kind of correct in a way, but completely devoid of empathy. Yeah, again, you've hit the nail on the head. Yeah. Again, technically, with Vulcan logic, you're right. With no human motion in there, you're right. But this is the kind of attitude that brings Games Workshop down in a lot of people's opinions. They don't have any logic. They don't have any human emotion. They don't have any things. This is why I made the moral police video years ago when Games Workshop were doing the BLM stuff and when we're getting involved in that. I know you don't give a shit about that. I know you don't, because you don't give a shit about anything but money. So please don't talk to me with your moral high ground, because you don't have one. You sell toy soldiers, and you're not fucking very good at it. So keep your mouth shut. This does not surprise me at all. Like that, there's this Vulcan, logic, but no human emotion in there at all. It just, yeah. One manager did mention that perhaps I can pull him aside, as in Steve, and give him some one-to-one time to talk about the hobby and things. Make him feel wanted and heard, which was great advice. Only for another manager to say, as long as it doesn't detract from other customers, of course. Again, more wise nodding from the rest of the brain trust. I left Nottingham that weekend with a cold and hollow feeling. Was I crazy for wanting to help so badly, or crazy for thinking that a corporation would have any other reaction to a very human problem? I was unsure, but the end of my first into Games Workshop had begun right there. This is where it gets a bit bad. This isn't bad yet? Oh, am I going to start fuming? I've just read the first line of the next bit. Here we go again. I got an email whilst at the store from HQ warning me about giving my number out to customers. And when I queried if this was an actual official warning on the books and can be used for a sacking and things like that, headquarters said yes. So you received an actual warning for giving your number. Jesus. But it's okay for them to shag mums. That's fine. You can get into relationships with customers' mums, but you're not allowed to give your number out. That's too... yeah, fuck off, dude. Over the next few months, I ran an event on a Sunday after work. I'm telling you now, dude. I'm telling you now. Right, your card is marked from now on. You've asked the wrong question at one of these training events, and so they've made a note of you, and they're now coming after you. I'm telling you now, that's what's going on. Over the next few months, I ran an event on a Sunday after work. I was normally off on Monday and Tuesday. This was just for Steve and his friends, whilst the store was closed. We had a blast and set up a Blood Bowl league with a microphone karaoke machine to announce the start of the night and the scores at the end of the evening, before we all went for pie and chips at the local pub. Those were sound and good times. Those good times were also the subject of my second warning. Apparently somebody from headquarters had tried to pop in, but found the store door locked after I was closed, and heard the microphone scores being read out, along with a load of cheering and things. That's brilliant. I can just imagine you saying, Dave's Dodgers won in the store. Steve Sex Slaves 2. And then lots of cheering. That's brilliant. I love it. Anyone who's lived in England and likes football, like that the Saturday afternoon when they read out the scores. That's hilarious. Why they didn't just knock on the window to be let in or something, I will never know. Regardless, I got a reluctant phone call from a very lovely lady at headquarters telling me that I had received another warning and that it was about playing events at the store despite being warned not to at the previous training day. I told you. Which to me showed they had marked my card, as you like to say. I literally do like to say, oh, Jesus Christ, you guys know me far too well. From the moment I asked that question in the meeting. Okay. That cold feeling returned, and this time it did not go away. I handed in my notice at the end of that month, but was convinced to stay to work Christmas, as me leaving that abruptly at the busiest point of the year could tank the store. Ironically, an admittance by them that I was doing a great job in a roundabout way. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah. Here are your 19 warnings, for things that we all do, but, we just don't like you. Oh, you want to leave? Oh, please don't leave, you're a really good manager. Fuck off. Get in the sea. Just for context, I went into business for myself after this, as a private tutor, and ended up earning good money before finally setting up my own tutoring business. Brilliant. Another fun fact, you've actually taught at my company in history, and I've not said anything to keep things professional. Safe to say, the company is doing very well. Okay, cool, I didn't realise that. I do work for tutoring companies whenever I've got a free moment, so yeah, nice. I came back to Games Workshop out of boredom, now that the company kind of runs itself a few years later. My store is right around the corner from my flat, and I love it. If they sack me, I don't care. Warn me, I don't care. I will forever run the store in the way I want to, because I'm now financially stable, and I have the means to. Weirdly, them having no power over me means they have left me alone ever since, which is kind of ironic. Steve is still around, and we have our Blood Bowl League on a Sunday still, even if he has to travel a bit further than my last store, so I only see him on Sundays. He even came to my wedding with a bunch of the other lads, and we had a jolly old knees up. Our Super Blood Bowl is always on Christmas Eve, after the store has shut and we head out for a few beers afterwards. This will be year number 3 for that, and Steve, thankfully, is on the straight and narrow. In my time at Games Workshop, I have met some diamond people. In fact, the only reason the store is doing so well, and that I get to do these evenings at all, is because there are a number of other managers and trainers from headquarters who think in exactly the same way I do. I think my company is a bipolar one, with a light and dark side pulling at each other to see which one wins out. It's just pot luck which one you are exposed to, and which exerts more influence over your career. Again, there are so many good ones at Games Workshop who have helped me personally and professionally. I'd say they outnumber the bad, and you've made that point before. It's just a shame that the bad voices are so often the louder ones. Yeah, man, that is a real shame. So there you are, a happy ending, but food for thought. Games Workshop have made great strides since the bad old days of my first stint there, but in some ways, these attitudes still prevail, along with a complete lack of empathy for their own managers and colleagues, let alone the customers. If you do ever work for us again, and I hope you do, fat chance of that, dude, look at my channel, just don't drink the Kool-Aid, fail on your own terms, rather than barely succeeding on theirs. Best, Gregarious Guardsman. Alright, man, thank you very much for that, that was awesome. Again, I very much doubt I will end up working for the company ever again, considering how my YouTube is, but, you never know, we'll see. Thank you very much for that, that was awesome, and really did show certain parts of the hobby that you very rarely see from a different standpoint. That is a reaction of a very real tragedy by the backroom staff at Games Workshop. It is what it is. I'm glad you're back there now, because we do need more managers like yourself fighting the good fight in Games Workshop, and you are completely true. I like that there is balance there. There are really good people at Games Workshop who require your assistance. The more of you who run away and don't come back to the hobby, like myself, ironically, the more people we're going to lose who could really be a positive influence in the hobby. I simply couldn't do it anymore, and it's one of my main regrets is that I didn't do it. I didn't even fight for it. I just left. I'd had enough. But at the same time, I get where you're coming from. We do need more people like that in the hobby. So if you're listening to this and you want to be one of those people, apply. Go work for Games Workshop. If you're in a financial situation where you can afford not being paid very much to give back to the hobby, do it. Go for it. I love you all a long time. Have a wonderful day. And I will speak to you tomorrow, where we'll be doing some more. I think we're going to be doing some more 40k stories or some Hobby Nightmares. But I will see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Love you all a long time. See you later. Bye.